Welcome to the Cult is King podcast. I'm the Duke here with my co-host, Rambling Bones.
Hello again.
Today, we will be doing the 1980 Roger Corman movie, Battle Beyond the Stars. But first, what do we do on here, Bones?
We talk about cult movies. If you don't really know what that is, a cult movie is one of those movies that, for one reason or another, isn't terribly mainstream or mainstream at all, but they have a following. A cult following, as you might have guessed, and we try to spread those cults and spread the joy of these movies.
And if you want to grow our cult, click the like button and subscribe.
Yeah.
You show a little more enthusiasm, Bones. Well, before I go into the synopsis, I know that you've seen this, is this your second time seeing this?
Yes, my second time seeing.
Would you just give us, what are your initial thoughts here?
Admittedly, it was not as good as it was the first time through, but I think I was watching it with a slightly more critical eye.
I'm going to be honest, I think I liked it a little more this time, but I think I was, I'll get in more in my mindset on this later, but yeah, actually, my opinion improved.
It's not that I didn't like it, it's just I didn't like it as much as I liked it the first time.
Well, here's the synopsis here. Our main character is Shad, and he lives on this largely agricultural planet called Akir. And everything's going normal when suddenly Sador appears. Sador is like this intergalactic warlord who has this huge ship that has this super weapon on it called the Stellar Converter. And he basically tells everybody on Akir that they can either accept him as their new ruler, or he can blow their planet up. The Akir are these hippy-dippy, peace-loving type people, and none of them, except for maybe one, know anything about fighting at all. So Shad goes out to recruit mercenaries to help take on Sador. And I think that's a good synopsis.
It's just the Magnificent Seven and Star Wars.
Right. Or, for those of you who are, like the deep cuts, if you've ever seen Seven Samurai, that's kind of what started this whole train of movies.
Yeah, Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, A Bug's Life, The Three Amigos, it's all similar plot. Bandits or bad guys terrorizing people go out and get help.
In fact, Seven Samurai was directed by Akira Kurosawa, which is why they are the Akir on this planet.
Subtle.
Not really, but that being said,
well, I think since most people, especially in America in 1980, are probably more aware of the Magnificent Seven than they are of Seven Samurai.
It might have been more subtle.
Then it probably would have been subtle.
Well, and I bring up Seven Samurai now just because, one, that's the originator, but also nowadays, now that it's more common and easier to watch foreign films, a lot of people have visited Seven Samurai.
We're trying to show that we aren't rubes and we know the deep cuts.
Right. Well, let's talk about deep cuts. We'll get more into cast and crew later, but one thing I thought was interesting is they actually, one of the mercenaries they recruit is one of the mercenaries recruited in the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
So that was an inspired casting choice, I thought. But yeah, it's that same, and it sounds like when Roger Corman was pitching this, he was very open about we are mashing up this, but with Star Wars, because the whole idea was, Roger Corman made movies to make money, right?
Yeah.
Often on shoestring budgets. In fact, this had a budget of $2 million, which, though not great compared to a lot of blockbusters even for the time, was the biggest I think Roger had ever had up to this point.
Yeah, it's the strange thing about this movie is if you're aware of Roger Corman's work and you watch this has a lot of effort that you aren't used to seeing in a normal Roger Corman movie. I at the very start of his career, he put out a bunch of crap, like Attack of the Crab Monsters and things of that nature, which are fun, but they're low budget as low budget can be. But when he started doing the Edgar Allan Poe movies with Vincent Price, the quality and filmmaking ability goes up. But after that,
it could go from movie to movie. It could be
absolute garbage.
It could be absolute toxic diarrhea like junk, or sometimes he would make something that was surprisingly good. And this is an example, in my opinion, of a movie that is way better than it had any right to be. Because this movie was made to cash in on Star Wars.
Hmm.
There were a lot of movies made in the late 70s and 80s meant to cash in on Star Wars. Some of them are borderline unwatchable. That hasn't stopped me from watching a good chunk of them.
Hmm.
But this one I think is actually pretty good.
It's a little bit higher caliber than some of the Star Wars ripoffs you will see.
And a little more higher caliber than a lot of Roger Corman movies.
It's definitely better than Turkish Star Wars. Well, where would you like to start?
There's all kinds of places that we could start here. I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of the special effects.
Yeah, that's probably a good place to start.
So, the version of this movie I watched was I have the Blu-ray, the Shout Factory Blu-ray, which was interesting because it came with some special features. One was an interview with Shad himself, and the other was with people who actually worked on the special effects. What's interesting is they were talking about, despite the fact that they were, this movie was made to be a space opera because we're cashing in on Star Wars, that they made like the intentional choice to try to get as far away from Star Wars in their design as possible. That each of the mercenaries' ships were supposed to look like they had been developed by a different culture on a different planet. And I think for the most part they accomplished that.
The only place where it feels like they didn't do that is the opening scene of the movie really screams of A New Hope.
Right.
But if instead of you have the Star Destroyer chasing Leia's ship, what if we just smashed Leia's ship and the Star Destroyer together and had them come towards a planet?
Yes, Sador's ship, it does evoke some of like the Empire from Star Wars, especially with, the whole stellar converter being, eerily similar to the Death Star. But every other ship I think looks very different. Some real creative designs. One of the mercenaries, like Gelt, has like this very like sleek kind of like wide looking ship, whereas there's a lizard man named Cayman, and his ship kind of has like
It looks like a largemouth bass.
it kind of does. It's kind of cool. There's like this tiny quick ship that like this Valkyrie type character has. The strangest ship is the one we see the most. Shad's ship is like supposed to be like an old fighting ship, an old Corsair, and not only does it have like a female like personality things in, but the ship itself looks like a slug with jugs.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. Once you see it, you just don't unsee it.
Yeah, I don't know why they chose to do that. It's definitely unique. And then, of course, they have like this UFO design for one of the group is called Nestor, and it's a hive mind of individuals. And like 4 of them are operating the ship, and the 5th is a spare, and they have kind of like very saucer shape,
It's probably the most foreign of all, because all the ships they look like ships, while this looks like a translucent UFO. Like it looks like it's made out of glowing metal as opposed to a ship with a glow around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's much different compared to everybody else's.
You know what we ought to do real quick before we even get into cast and crew or more on the special effects? We should probably run down each of the mercenaries.
Yeah,
What do you think?
that's fine.
Okay, so of the mercenaries hired, the first one we run into is Cowboy, and he's actually from Earth.
He is a space trucker with the stars and bars on the back of his ship.
And a belt that dispenses alcohol.
He likes cowboy movies. And well, with most of the people in this movie, they all just sort of fall into Shad's lap.
You're right. He's like the first one he runs into because his load is being picked off by... Is it Satyr ships or just somebody else?
Just pirates.
Just pirates.
Yeah, he's shipping guns, which of course Shad needs.
Right. And unfortunately, whoever he was going to sell them to just got blown up by Sador, so he conveniently has a nice load of guns for them. We have Gelt. He is basically like this mercenary who basically was too successful and now basically has nowhere to spend all his wealth because he's wanted everywhere.
Where you run into him at is there's this sort of casino bar place where mercenaries used to hang out at, but all of the planets around sort of unionized and proceeded to remove all of the mercenaries from the area. So he's sort of the last one standing in this really cool like abandoned bar thing.
Yeah, it's like underground because the whole planet is like covered in like basically these storms. And it's interesting because you can see like all of this stuff that people would use. Like there's a dial a drug and there's like some sort of like, pin up, pick out like
fembot prostitutes.
Right, but all of this stuff is in like disrepair and like covered in webs and stuff because the only one left is Gelt, who can't even spend his money.
And Gelt is played by the actor who was in The Magnificent Seven, and he's pretty much sort of doing the same character.
But honestly, I think that was the best way to handle it, especially since we're being so open of what we're doing here. You know what I mean? There's Cayman. He is the last of basically these like reptile men that Sator mostly wiped out, and in his little crew, he has like two little people who are called Kelvins.
They're like twins.
They're like twins, and they communicate entirely through differences in temperature. And some just like barbarian dude who never says anything.
The barbarian dude, he's super buff. He's got a spear. Says nothing. He's barely in the movie, apart from 3 shots.
Right. One of which he kills somebody with said spear.
Yes, which was very cool. I don't even know if he dies. You just don't know what happened to him or what he does. All you know is he's there and somebody gets speared.
We also have Saint Exim, who is a woman from like this Valkyrie barbarian race. Her powers are that her ship is really fast and that she has very large breasts that are often on display.
Yeah, so she's played by Sybil Danning, and just the way they have the camera angled in the ship, and it's like like
it's a little gratuitous.
It's exploitative at this point.
That being said, this is an exploitation movie.
Yeah, it's Roger Corman, so yeah.
And from what I understand, I mean, this was kind of her role in movies.
Yeah, Sybil Danning's career has been nothing but B movies where she is hot, right. And that's it.
But yeah,
it's
a little much.
It's so blatant compared to everything else in this movie. This movie, for the most part, I mean, it's not like a little kid's movie or anything. There's some adult stuff in there, but for the most part, it's pretty like family friendly. And then bam,
except for just a couple parts that feel like a little out of place, but it also feels very Roger Corman.
We gotta have this. It's important for the sales.
Well, so I was watching the interview with the actor who played Shad.
Yeah.
And his name is
Richard Thomas.
Richard Thomas, and he was talking about apparently on set she had like this bodice for like her Valkyrie getup, and they had to constantly monitor it because sometimes things would escape.
Jeez.
To let you know how tight this was, yeah. But I think that covers our mercenaries. Did I miss any?
We didn't talk about Nestor.
Oh, Nestor. How could I forget Nestor? He was one of the cooler ones. You want to tell us about Nestor?
So Nestor's the one who is a hive mind and drives around in the very cool spaceship. They're like all painted white with an eye painted on their forehead. They have their normal eyes, but they have a third eye, of course.
Because they're enlightened.
And it's a hive mind, so there's one Nestor, but many... I think the word they used was facets.
Yes, and apparently because they're all a hive mind, Nestor has to spread himself out and go on adventures to avoid being bored to death.
Yeah.
No, they literally just show up because they just want to go on an adventure because they need something stimulating. They didn't have to be convinced.
There's a funny part where Nestor has a hot dog for the first time, and one of them bites into it and they all start chewing, which is extra funny if you consider the fact that there might be hundreds of thousands of other guys chewing at the same moment.
Nestor is enjoying a hot dog all over the universe.
Exactly.
So those are our setups. And going back to the special effects, one name that will come out to a lot of people is James Cameron. He was not the only person who worked on the special effects, but of course he was one of the ones who would go on to be super well known, working on Terminator, Avatar, and a million other movies. I think before this he'd already worked with Roger Corman on, I can't remember if it was just Piranha 2 or if he also worked on the original as well, but they had previous experience.
The original, at least some of the original, was Rob Bottin, so it might be the second one.
Okay.
Or maybe he worked on the first one as well, but typically...
And maybe wasn't in charge.
Yeah.
I'd have to look again, but I know that this was not his first time working with Corman. And it was funny because one of the things that's interesting about the miniature work done here is how ambitious a lot of it is, especially for how little money
they had.
In fact, all of the special effects were done on a new studio that Corman had bought. And by new studio, I mean he bought a lumber yard in Venice, California to make this movie. And they had a shed where they did the special effects scenes. And they had one of the areas was converted to be a stage. It was interesting because he didn't want people to know that this was a movie studio now because he was afraid that people would want to rob it. They thought that this was a big movie studio as opposed to just a lumber yard. But carpenters would show up to buy wood from the lumber yard, and instead he would immediately hire them to work on his sets. Apparently a lot of carpenters were just hired on the spot there. It was interesting too because Richard was talking about how he was really amazed at a lot of the stuff going on. I mean, a lot of the stuff that became these stages were really just found material art pieces that they were making.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some of the scenes, including the one on Cayman's ship, the paint was still drying and they were still putting it together as the actors were getting on. They had fans apparently going to try to dry it while they were getting into their spots.
That's not surprising, knowing how Roger Corman and low-budget filmmaking are just by the seat of their pants 24/7.
Right. One thing I also learned, obviously nowadays, using minis and stuff, we would consider that old school, but they actually consider a lot of the techniques that they were using old school at the time, because I guess in the 80s we forget, but things like blue screen and stuff were becoming options, and even some very limited computer stuff. But they were mostly just using miniatures and forced perspective shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part, it works. And some parts definitely look like you're watching a movie. But I thought the special effects aged pretty well.
Some of the blue screen they did, you can tell. But actually, the forced perspective stuff looks really good, I thought.
Yeah, the older techniques are the ones that held up the best for this movie.
Yeah. No, anything that was in... Any effect that was in camera definitely looked a lot better, I thought. I will say there are some times where there is a cool shot of ships fighting, and it was so cool you get to see it again and again and again.
Well, and I believe, I'd have to double check on this, but I think some of this footage, not much of it, but I think some of it was used from a previous movie that Corman had done. And I definitely know that Corman would go on to use some shots from this movie for another sci-fi movie.
I don't remember what it's called. It's probably Corman, but there's a movie where it is essentially 4 different movies that were never released, re-edited together.
Was it watchable at all?
No, it wasn't. But Roger Corman is definitely a big fan of recycling his property.
Mm-hmm. He is. In fact, the music for here was original, but he would use this music again, too.
Wow, the music's really good. I'll go ahead and just talk a bit about the music guy. James Horner is an actual composer who has composed actual things. You mentioned James Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did Aliens, as well as Titanic, and I believe he also maybe did the music for Avatar. He was at least a part of the music department. Did the music for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, the Captain EO Michael Jackson short film. He also did the music for the newest remake of The Magnificent Seven.
See, it's all time is a flat circle.
It all comes around.
It was interesting too because he was very young when he did it. I think he gave his all into this trying to like make a career for himself because he didn't I don't know if he'd ever done one before this. Certainly not much.
There was maybe 4 others. This was definitely like at the start of his career.
And it definitely, I think, helped launch it. And I thought the music was pretty good in this one.
Yeah, I will say that there isn't much diverse. Like, I'm sure he wrote more than just the main track, but it's like he went super hard on the main theme, and then they just kept using the main theme throughout the entire thing.
If he put anything else, you wouldn't be able to hear it over the pews.
But there is some other music for it, but definitely. I think they were trying to think, like Star Wars has such an iconic soundtrack, so just trying to really get that earworm in there.
Another person who was important to the movie was John Sayles. He wrote the script, and it was kind of amazing because, he was talking with Roger, and Roger's like, just write this to be as good as it can. I will figure out how to cut the money. Because if you look at it, and really if you look at this movie, like take a step back and like you were to look through the script, it's kind of ambitious just for like the planets they showed, especially like when they were going to find Gelt, the planet where there's just these storms going constantly. The way Akir was set up, and especially the space battles.
Typically, like the worst sin low-budget filmmakers can do, I think this is especially true of modern low-budget filmmakers, but going higher concept than their budget can do. It's so frustrating where you watch something like maybe Phantasm 5, where there's such so many ridiculous special effects required, but they couldn't afford anything other than bad CGI, and it really just takes a major hit on the movie. But this movie, they went high concept and were just able to pull it off because they had so many talented people behind it. And as much crap as Roger Corman makes, he does understand money and how to stretch a budget. So I think that's to his credit.
No, Richard came on the set saying, I hope this makes some money. And they said, Roger, just trust Roger on this. We're going to make money.
I believe I remember hearing Corman say that he's never lost any money on a movie.
Which I firmly believe. He's got a gift. Now, sometimes that gift is just to put out schlock, but I think this is a movie that would be worth people's time to watch. But yeah, no, it's amazed that they were able to go higher concept and still come out okay. However, I think the issue with a lot of filmmakers that do it today is they go for as high concept as they can, and then they're just like, we will CGI it all.
Yeah.
Here, and of course they can't afford the best programs or the amount of time necessary or the best artists, and you get a meh product. Whereas when you were low budget filmmaking at this time, the really memorable stuff is, okay, we have a limited budget. How can we be creative? What like techniques can we use? They pioneered a lot of things to get these looks. So, I mean, these people were working around the clock constantly on all of this stuff in their various studios. I think they had like 3 design teams going at once, filming different space battles.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, they filled that void with like ingenuity, whereas
Yeah.
now they're all trying to just repeatedly drink from the same well.
And those who didn't know any ingenuity made some very silly movies.
They did. I've seen some very strange and some very bad things, but you know what? They're part of what makes having a channel like this fun.
John Sayles, apart from doing the screenplay for this, he also did the screenplay for The Howling, Alligator, and Piranha. Other than that, he didn't actually do a whole lot.
One person who you probably didn't know was at the set was Bill Paxton.
Why was Bill Paxton on set?
He was doing handyman stuff. He was helping to build things, and he was there. I think he was recommended by James Cameron. But yeah, no, Bill Paxton was there. He's not in the movie, but he did help put it together.
I'm not an expert on Paxton's career, But I would guess that if he's working as a handyman on this film, this was probably before his career took off.
I think it was like just before. Everybody apparently says that he was hilarious on set and helped keep everybody's spirits up while they were like putting this out at a quick rate.
Let's see, do you have anything else you'd like to mention about these special effects?
I'm sure that if I were more knowledgeable about special effects, I could say even more, but for the most part, well, I do have this to say. One distinct advantage they had about having each ship be very unique from all the other ships is it does make the space battles more interesting because you can tell who is who.
Yeah, that does help.
And it's less like Star Wars where, you have like, here are the good guy ships, here are the bad guy ships, but it's like, no, you can pick out which individual characters are where. So I thought that was just another neat thing that just came out of these choices.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I think the special effects crew did a good job. And I think you could say they did a tremendous job if you consider the budget and pressure they were under.
I'll real quickly touch on why maybe didn't enjoy this movie as much as I did the first time. Is the story is really weak. It is really weak.
It doesn't really venture much from its premise. It's more of the first half of the movie is jump from place to place, recruiting these people. And then after that, it's have space battles.
Yeah.
Which makes it a breezy watch, but it's not like you're going to become...
It's like within the first 5 minutes, without even knowing anything about Shad, he's already been sent out to go find mercenaries.
Right, there is no build up to that. They immediately throw Shad into space.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like background that they hint at because the ship that he pilots talks and has a history and brings up things. The ship I also found annoying. I didn't think I found it annoying the first time, but this
it
time...
It didn't bother me.
Yeah, I found her annoying this time.
Have you ever considered that maybe the reason you don't enjoy it this much the second time around is that you're a curmudgeon who's impossible to please?
No. I think the ship was annoying, or at least not so annoying that it made it so like every time I hear the ship talk, I'm dying, but annoying enough that I'm like, man, I kind of wish the ship didn't talk. And as I said earlier, a lot of the mercenaries just sort of fall into his lap. There's never a real struggle to recruit.
No, he runs into Cowboy not that long into being into space. Nestor finds him. There's a girl he meets at a space station who decides to follow him, and she gets captured by people who are very easily talked into killing Sador. So no, they do. And I mean, part of this, I guess, is the fact that we have to recruit them all within the film's runtime.
Yeah.
But it's not... This is definitely a breezier watch than other incarnations of the story because, I mean, the Magnificent Seven... Minor spoilers for all of the Magnificent Seven derived movies, or I should say Seven Samurai derived movies except for Bug's Life, is that once the battles start happening, we start to lose our mercenaries, right? And it's like really like dark and poignant in like Seven Samurai, but even like in the Magnificent Seven, you kind of feel for them as you lose them. But we don't actually get to know any of these ones terribly well, so it's not super high impact, even though each character is kind of cool. Most of them have maybe like one personality trait.
They spend maybe 5 minutes prior to the big battle sort of having the characters interact on a cure. Apart from that, we don't really get much time to get terribly attached to them.
No, we maybe get the most time with Cowboy, but even then that's not a huge amount.
Yeah.
Like I said, this isn't meant to necessarily to be a dark and poignant movie anyway. But, it would have raised the stakes a little bit. I mean, if you consider what this movie is, which is a popcorn movie, it's a space battle movie.
It's okay to want more from your popcorn movies.
It is, but it's also okay to accept something for what it is and go along for the ride.
No,
and
that's true.
That's kind of, like, I'm not saying that your criticisms are wrong or anything. No, I mean, the plot is pretty bare bones. We move from place to place and we see a lot of cool space battles. So if you're looking for heavy character development, you're not going to find it here.
I will say a bonus, though, for this movie is all of the mercenaries do stand out. It may not be a terribly deep character, but it's like you look at him and it's like, yeah, that's the lizard man, that's the Valkyrie, that's the space mercenary, that's the cowboy trucker.
I think the costumes help with this. Not only does each one have a distinct ship, but each one has like a very distinct look. And that look does usually pretty well to like characterize what their deal is.
Especially the buff guy with the spear, but that's partly because he looks completely out of place.
Yeah, I don't even know if you count him as one of the mercenaries or if he's just on Cayman's team. If he's just like this buff guy Cayman keeps around in case something heavy needs carried.
He looks like Roger Corman was making multiple movies at once, and he just, hey, we need another stand-in. Come just be in this real quick.
Well, Roger Corman did produce his share of barbarian exploitation movies because the movies to cash in around this time, this era, I don't know if Conan had just come out yet or if it was about
Conan
to come out
would
in a year or
be
two.
a couple years from
I think
there.
you're right. But no, Conan and Star Wars were the movies too. Well, and we had a lot of martial arts exploitation movies too.
Which, speaking of martial arts, I think we should talk about Sador.
Yeah.
He doesn't actually do any martial arts, but he's played by John Saxon, who's in Enter the Dragon. So
Right.
that's where the connection is in my brain.
Well, and maybe Sador could do martial arts if he didn't have to keep replacing body parts.
Sador is actually, at first he looks a little silly because it's John Saxon in silver paint with either a scar or war paint, or
Yeah, I'm
he's
not
got
sure
something across his face, but he just keeps like replacing his limbs with other people's limbs.
Well, and they mention, I mean, I guess it seems like everybody on his ship is some sort of mutant, and I guess Sador has been around for a very long time, and I guess he does this by constantly replacing parts from aliens that he kills and harvesting and replacing them. He's got like an on-ship surgeon with a light-up chainsaw.
Yeah, there's actually pretty clever part where Nestor pretty much sacrifices one of his facets so that Sador will take his arm. But of course, Nestor is still in control of that arm, and so tries to kill Sador with the Nestor
Yeah,
arm.
with the arm that he's just grafted on. I thought that was a creative idea.
It was also kind of funny because Sador's gloves are all like 5-fingered, and the brand new arm he gets has 3 like big beefy fingers.
Yeah, he turns to one of like his subordinates, is like, but we're going to have to do something about this.
Yeah.
And Sador, John Saxon, I think, does a fine job of being the villain. If there was anybody, though, who could have really stood maybe just a little more screen time and a little more, like, investigation, maybe it would be Sador.
Yeah.
Because right now, he's very much your generic space villain.
Yeah, he's going to enslave your planet or shoot it with a laser that turns it into a sun, which is very Death Star-esque, but I do appreciate that it turns it into a sun and doesn't just explode your planet.
Well, and I mean, in this case, too, the weakness in it makes a lot of sense. His shields are very tough, but once he's cleared out the opposition, he can't use the stellar converter until the shields are down, which makes sense.
Yeah, or at least the shields where the stellar converter is. And spoiler, Sybil Danning, the Valkyrie,
does a kamikaze.
She shoots half of her ship into it, and it explodes where the stellar converter is, and then she blows up her own ship and takes out a lot of the other guys. But it's cool, but at the same time, when she shoots half of her ship into Sador's ship, she lets out a screech that is less of a cool war cry and more of a whoa, first take on that. I see. We didn't think maybe that was not the cool war cry to go with.
Well, and what's even funnier to me is then later we see Cayman feels the need to let out a war cry of short, and I don't know if that came off the way they were hoping.
Doesn't he also try to kamikaze his ship, or is he just trying to?
He thinks he's going to ram it and it's going to work out, but Sador's shields were more powerful, and it did not. You know,
there's kind of a lot of kamikazing in this movie if I think about it. Shad takes his ship, and He and Nanelia, who's the girl he met on the satellite thing, they set the ship to explode as it's being sucked up by Sador's tractor beam, I guess. And they are able to take an escape pod out, but they blow up the ship to kill Sador, which of course kills the annoying voice on the ship as well. That scene was a little less tragic for me than it might have been for others.
I mean, I'm not especially attached to this ship with the voice, but I don't remember having this sort of animosity. I guess I tell you what, if you did watch this movie before, or if you're going to watch this movie in the comments, I don't know, what'd you think? Did that bother you? is Bones just crazy, or does just nothing bother me?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you precisely what my criticism of the ship's voice is. I just know
You
I
just
didn't
don't like
like
it.
it. Simple as, okay?
Okay, well, you know what? Fair enough. I'll give it to you. That didn't do it for you.
Well, we've sort of off and on talked about cast.
Yeah, do you want to just run in and go through?
Yeah, before we even get to cast, I'll mention the director real quick. The director was Jimmy Murakami, and he did not direct a lot. In fact, he mostly directed animated stuff.
Right, did he ever direct another feature like this after this? Because I don't think he directed any movies, or at least any movies that, were animation before this. I don't think he did any after either.
I don't think he did anything like this again, but he did When the Wind Blows, which has music by David Bowie. He did The Snowman, which it's an animated sort of Christmas film, which also has David Bowie. He did a single segment in the movie Heavy Metal, and the Tootsie Pop ad, with the owl.
Oh,
How many licks? He did that,
iconic.
and that was about it. When the Wind Blows and The Snowman are both pretty well remembered, or at least critically liked. So I thought it was strange. I don't know. All of the things are strange with this.
Yeah, this is a weird movie. Well, and when we get to the rest of the cast, it gets stranger because we have such a mix of people. Now, though Murakami did direct this, I think a lot, especially early on, Corman assisted him pretty heavily, at least at the beginning, until he kind of got used to it. Because, like I said, this is the only time he directed, I think, something that wasn't animated. I don't think he went on to do any more. Which,
Yeah.
It makes you kind of surprised the direction seems smooth as it is, because you would think, being a complete novice, that it would be hard.
Shad, our main character, is Richard Thomas. He is in The Waltons. That's probably what he's most famous for. And he is also in the made-for-TV original movie, It. And
I always forget that he's in that.
yeah, those are the two things I know him from. He's very recognizable because he's got sort of I don't know if it's a mole or a birthmark or something. He's got something on his cheek. So he sort of stands out.
I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff, but if you look, a lot of it's made for TV movies that he was in. And then he was in with some smaller projects and stuff, and I think he still does stuff when he can. But no, it was interesting here, though, because he was most famous from The Waltons. Now, despite being like a TV show, it was a very well-regarded, highly acclaimed one, and he had a very iconic role on it throughout all of the seasons. So people would have instantly watched this and known that was John Boy.
This is, I'm sure nobody's seen it, but looking through his filmography, I did get a little chuckle out of seeing that there was a Hank Williams Jr. movie where he plays Hank Williams Jr.
John Boy does?
Yes, and there's that's so bad casting. He's the last person I would pick to play Hank Williams Jr. I guess I'd have to watch the movie to tell you how bad, if the casting is even bad or
Watch
not.
it be like the best movie ever.
It could be the definitive Hank Williams Jr. movie.
But no, if I was casting, that would not have been my first choice.
No, it would have not.
And I think he does a good job in this. Like I said, there's not a lot of character moments for things to sit and go. One thing that was interesting, though, he was talking about one of the things he constantly practiced was trying to, all of them had to figure out how they piloted their ships. So he was constantly, trying to make motions because he's trying to, generally in acting, you try to take things back to prior experiences or like look at how somebody in real life would do something and try to mimic it. But he's flying a starship, which nobody's done yet. So he was talking about how it was kind of difficult trying to make it look right and feel right.
He didn't go with the, driving a car, one hand on the top of the steering wheel, cruising.
Yeah, I don't think that would have had the same effect or sense of urgency here.
Yeah, maybe would have taken away from some of the space battles.
Now, if you want to talk, though, about a proper cult movie actor, John Saxon.
Yeah, John Saxon.
We like John Saxon here on Cult is King, don't we, Bones?
Yeah, he is an actor who is in good things and he is in bad things, but he is always good in whatever he is in, even if it is only for 5 minutes.
Right. Granted, he was in here for more than 5 minutes, but just to give you an idea, and this is by no means the complete John Saxon filmography, he's one of those actors I've come to understand that while I may not expect him to be there, if I'm watching anything from the 70s or 80s, I would never bet any amount of money that he wouldn't show up, because you never know. He's everywhere, especially movies I like to watch. But we already mentioned he was in Enter the Dragon, where he had a pretty significant part as Roper. But he was also in a Dario Argento movie, Tenebrae. He was in Nightmare on Elm Street, and the third one is Nancy's Father.
And in A New Nightmare.
And he was in the MST3K favorite, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's the one where he's only in it for 5. He's quickly written out of the story.
But he was in Mitchell. It's funny because that movie's probably more well known because of Mystery Science Theater than for any notoriety it had necessarily on its own. But every time I go back to watch it, because I always remember it's a funny episode, but every time, I've watched it like 3 times now, every time I'm always surprised to see John Saxon in it. You think I'd learn at this point, but like I said, I could go on, but those I thought was a good smattering.
He could have definitely probably had a little more screen time in this, but he's not absent.
He's not underutilized, and he does a good job of being evil and from space.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a terribly deep villain, but it's still fun.
Another one, of course, that we've already mentioned is Gelt. He's played by Robert Vaughn. We already mentioned probably one of his most significant roles, just period, is Magnificent Seven. But he was also in Bullet. Demon Seed is another kind of cult movie he was in. But probably most famously after Magnificent Seven, he played the lead role in Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was a TV series that was very popular at the time.
Yeah, there's a period in his career called the 80s where
a little something called the 80s.
I don't want to know what happened because it's always depressing. It's like, this guy was dealing with alcoholism or like a divorce or something, so he had to keep acting and all this crap to make money. But I'm going to pretend that he just liked to act and chose to act in Chud 2, Bud the Chud. And I think he was in, I think he was in Zombie 5. Let me check my notes here. Yes, he was in Zombie 5.
Well, many people say that's the best zombie. And by many people, I mean, I've never heard that there was a Zombie 5.
Yeah, I was about to say you didn't know that there was a Zombie 5.
I didn't know there was a Zombie 3. I thought it was just 2. Wow, we'll have to go through the zombie movies.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not, this is fine, We'll get through all the movies eventually.
But yeah, no, his career in the movies in the 80s with him are yeah, they're like that.
That being said, I don't know what his attitude on the other ones were or how he felt about doing this movie, but according to Richard, he seemed personable and still very professional about his job on this craft.
The next person I have on my list is George Peppard, who played Space Cowboy, and he wasn't in a lot that I know. He was in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, which was probably his most acclaimed role.
And yeah, he was in a movie called Blue Max and The Ground Star Conspiracy, which I've seen neither.
Well, you have seen him though. You missed his most notable role. This is Hannibal from A-Team.
I'm so stupid. I don't know why I completely missed that.
Though? Sometimes you see somebody so much that you just you miss him.
Yeah.
But no, this is Hannibal from the A-Team, which is probably his most notable role, seeing as the A-Team is huge, and I still watch it. I love the A-Team.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame, though. They never say, see you, space cowboy.
Nope.
Not
well,
once.
Weebs hadn't been invented yet.
They called the planet Akir, okay? There's at least one weeb on. But yeah, I think that's all we can really say for him. And then I believe her name was Saint Exmin.
I have it written Exim.
Exim. I literally just thought her name was Valkyrie because she's essentially a Valkyrie. But Sybil Danning, the movie I know her best from is Howling 2, Your Sister's a Werewolf.
Classic.
Which is, it's absolute trash. It is so
it's
bad.
Completely bonkers, and I hope to make Bones watch it sometime soon.
She's also in a movie called The Panther Squad, which I'm aware of. She was in a single episode of V, and also The Tomb. But if you just look through her filmography, it's nothing but B movies, typically involving women with guns. She's not like a scream queen.
No, and the other two I had listed for her was she was in Hercules with Lou Ferrigno, and I've never watched it, but I am intrigued. Amazon Women on the Moon.
That is it's like a comedy movie with like a bunch of sketches. I'm pretty sure the general consensus is that it is not good. But
good. That'll be my next.
I've
pick.
seen at least one bit from it that was funny to me, so maybe it is funny in a dumb sort of way.
Did you know she plays her part well in this?
Yeah.
What there is, for the to the credit, I thought that she gave a lot of life and made her role very fun.
She's not bad in the movie. It's just you kind of look at the filmmaking and you're like, huh. Yeah.
It's very apparent why Sybil was chosen.
Yeah.
For better or worse. I mean, that is kind of the role she filled in a lot of these movies. I mean, a lot of the B movies she was in was kind of sleazier efforts.
Yeah.
But for the record, I thought she was likable in this. I don't want to take away,
No, she's not bad in this.
The funniest casting to me was the casting of Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
He's played by Morgan Woodward. He appeared in a lot of Westerns. He was not a regular on Gunsmoke, but he made more guest appearances than anybody else, appearing in 19 episodes. He was also in Cool Hand Luke and a movie very dear to our channel, Supervan.
Yeah, the bad guy in Supervan. You literally wouldn't know it was him if you watch this movie. He's he's a lizard man.
Right. No, he's well hidden under makeup. I would have never picked it out, and I mean he's doing a voice which is suitable for Cayman. But yeah, if you hadn't told me this, I would never have figured it out. So the last person I wrote down was Nenelia. She is kind of Shad's love interest. We didn't mention her because she wasn't one of the mercenaries in Super Depth, but basically she's been like kept in space all her life on the space station by her father. So she goes out to go on adventures. She didn't seem to appear in tons of stuff. She was in The Third Darkman. She was
classic
in Pet Sematary 2.
Yeah.
And then I think this movie did well enough. Once Upon a Time in America.
Oh yeah, no, that's
right. And I didn't think she was bad or anything, but a lot of the movies that I recognized or that I saw that she was in tend to be sequels to movie franchises.
Chud
that didn't
2,
need
Bud the
sequels.
Chud type. The last person I wrote down was Nestor 1, because there are multiple actors playing Nestor, but Nestor 1 is Earl Bowen, who has 286 credits, but most of those are voice acting. He's done a lot of voices in video games.
Do you have any examples off the top of your head?
He did the various voices in one of the Call of Duty games. So
okay.
What I didn't even recognize him from, but he is Dr. Silberman in Terminators 1 through 3. If I remember correctly, he's like the police psychologist.
Right.
I mean, you can't even recognize him because they're all sort of wearing this. I don't think it's supposed to be a bald cap, or maybe it is supposed to be a bald cap. They're all wearing like this white garment on their head.
Yeah, to make it look like they have I guess, big heads,
I don't know what it's supposed to be, but
That
you can't tell who it is.
And his face is covered in white paint.
And then, we talked about Roger Corman a bit.
He was the B-movie king.
King of...
Directing, producing. I think he's still active.
Yeah, he still produces. I think nothing past the 2000s or nothing past the 90s is probably worth watching, if we're going to be honest.
He's been active for forever. I want to say like one of the first ones was like Attack of like the Giant Leeches.
He was doing stuff even prior before. Like,
yeah.
Reading a bit about him, he started out as a messenger for 20th Century Fox. And this was back in the day when you could be a messenger and then rise to the rank of script supervisor and then go and do more. And I think he wrote a screenplay that got turned into a movie, and he didn't really like how it turned out, so he started making his own stuff. And I'm sort of curious if he started out with the intention of making like good movies, and it just turned into, well, but this is how you make money, and that's more important. Or if from the start it was, where did the producer mindset set in, is my question.
The strangest thing about Roger Corman is if all his movies were bad, that would make sense. But we see that he has talent when he wants to apply it, and I guess under the right conditions, because like the Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent Price movies were pretty good.
Yeah, and he produced and directed a lot of those.
And those are considered classics in their genre, or just kind of in general. And of course it helped they had Vincent Price to work with, but yeah, those were well done.
And Piranha is low budget, but it's still also pretty fondly remembered.
But it's like a real movie.
Yeah.
And then he made this, which, I think is pretty decent, but it does not look like a movie made by somebody who tries to see if he can stretch $50 to cover the whole film, you know what I mean? So, but then he does have films that do very much appear to be hot garbage. So like I said, I hate to say he's not talented. He also probably has some great business savvy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's just a very strange creature in the mythos of movies.
And he's definitely, I don't see him as bad as a lot of these B-movie producers, because I feel like he is at least connected to the crap he makes, even if it is just garbage.
No, and I think Roger was hands-on in a lot of his movies. So, like I said, he's made some must-watches, he's made some cult classics, and he's made some, even by cult standards, what is this? Why does this exist? Why did you do this to us, Roger?
And since we went into everyone else's acting credits, let's talk about Roger Corman's brief acting credits. He is in Silence of the Lambs, Scream 3, and he is a senator in Godfather Part 2. He just shows up in random places. Probably because, I'm going to guess people just know him.
Well, and I think a lot of people got their start in his movies. Lord Jack Nicholson was in the original Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
Before anybody would have ever dreamed of knowing who this guy is. With the sheer volume of movies he either directed or produced, there's no way he didn't rub all kinds of elbows in Hollywood.
I believe the number is 493 movies produced.
Which is insane.
Mind you, it might be like producer, executive producer, or some other producer-related job, but that's a lot of movies to work on.
So I think I'm kind of going into my final thoughts here, unless you have another topic that you think is...
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, so this is a movie where if you're looking to see a good standalone sci-fi movie, I think this is a good one. As Bones has pointed out, the story here is not super deep, but if you're ready to just kind of be taken through space on a wild ride, I think you'd enjoy this one.
If you want to see Magnificent Seven in space with Star Wars elements, this is for you.
Yeah.
Would recommend.
Well, Bones, what do we want to watch next week?
All right, so I'm going to have you pick a number between 1 and 3, because I have 3 that I would really like to talk about. but I can't be bothered to pick.
Well, I'm going to go with 3 because it's a magic number. So what is it?
Okay, we are going to talk about Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure. A drastically different movie than what we have been talking about for the last however long we've been talking.
Well, it's going to be another episode of bad pronunciations, and I'm going to be honest with you, Bones. I'm not sure I'm equipped to rate any movies that don't have rubber monsters in them, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, this is I think we'll mostly
a little
be
ambitious here.
Yeah. It'll be the first episode where the entire episode is us trying to figure out what even was the plot.
That's why you need this channel, because there's going to be people who have like all these video essays about the deep meaning, but this is like, we're real dudes watching this, and we're going to be honest with you if we have no clue.
Yeah, guys, we spent the last 2 hours. We don't know what we watched either. Tell us in the comments.
And if you are a film expert, here's a Rube's view, for perspective.
There you go. But yeah, thank you for listening to this episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Castbox, and YouTube, of course. And feel free to subscribe, leave a comment, and smash the like button.
Smash it.
It's not even fun to say anymore.
Use your stellar converter and fire up on the like button.
But yeah, thank you for listening.
And keep it cold.